It was as if a river of red and white had swept across our country. The athletes have connected with each and every one of you like never before. Whether it be John Montgomery's victory march through Whistler with that now famous pitcher of beer, or Melissa Hollingsworth's tearful apology after missing the podium. You know, in the past, to cynics, we would have said, how Canadian. Tonight, we say with pride, yes, very Canadian, sincere, heartfelt, and with a deep love for this country.
Sportsfeld! It is Sportsfeld Storytime, and we have exhausted ourselves of talking about being disappointed in Toronto sports teams. I think we're in the mood for a victory. We're in the mood for some nationalism, for some feel good. No, we're in the mood for something we had memories of our being quasi grown ups and feeling good about sports. I think is sort of for me what the big impetus here was, because we talked during the Raptors content earlier. In one of these months, and you made mention to the 2010 Olympics sort of being the only time that we had any positive association with any sports team, and that blew my mind, but you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, I guess I measure impactful sports moments over, what the bar experience was for it. Or the watching experience.
Yes.
But if I rack my brain pre 2013, I guess it's one time in university I watched a World Juniors gold medal when I cared about those, and that's it.
This we are referencing is the 2010 Team Canada gold medal in men's ice hockey. Before we even get into it, we should mention that the women's ice hockey team, just as if not more exciting for all of these exciting men's hockey teams, the women's Canada-US gay games.
It's funny you say that because I was going to mention this when we're not recording the episode, but whatever. I was going to suggest we do the 2010 women's for the next one.
Yeah, and also on our short list of ones that we sort of batted around was the women's Olympic soccer. That classic Christine Sinclair. Believe the arrival of the sport as one of the top rivalries that we have in this country. But no, to set the stage, 2010, the dawn of a new decade. 2010, by the math, a little back of the napkin math here, 24 years old I was in my 25th year, but I had not yet turned 24 because these happened at the beginning. I guess the roster releases in December, and then the games themselves in the early part of the year.
Yeah, I guess I was in my 22nd year, but was not yet. No. Yes. My 22nd year, but was not yet 22, I think.
So you are just beginning your watching games in bars sort of era, because I was in college for 2006, the forgotten Olympics, bad Olympic experience. I want to say that was Turin, Italy. That was.
Yes, I believe you're correct.
I was 21 and did not watch any of it, which, considering the fact that I was super into 2002 and super into 2010, is a little bit surprising.
Yeah, I actually feel like I was kind of the same.
I don't remember anything about that team.
No, and I remember being frustrated and mad about it when they lost. But if you were to ask me, anything about the tournament or even who was on the roster, I could not tell you. And I don't remember. I remember. Obviously, I was too young to be in a bar, but I remember where and with who I watched the 2002 gold medal game.
Yes,
I have no memory of watching any of the 2006 tournament.
Well, they also didn't have a one big game, right? Didn't they flame out?
Yeah, I think they lost in the quarters, I want to say.
Brian McCabe was on that team. That's sort of the only thing I have in terms of things that I definitely remember about the 2006 team. But sort of talk about 2016 quickly. They, as you said, they were unimpressive. They lost 2 group stage games, lost 1 game to Switzerland, which is a horror, and they were eliminated by the rivals, Russia, who at that point, I mean, not at that point, historically, Canada's biggest rival in hockey, though I think this era, 2002, 2010, and forward, sort of begins the era of the United States being Canada's biggest rival at hockey.
Yeah, and I mean, 2002 was also against the States, but I feel like that one was like we are expected to.
Yeah, they were underdogs. The States were underdogs. Not that they were favored over Canada in 2010, but it was a little more even footing than we found ourselves in
I think I remember
2002.
Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, my memory is that 2006 was like the transition year.
Right.
Because like 2002, if I remember correctly, I think Lemieux was on that team. And Sakic, and it was like their last hurrah.
That is correct. Lemieux and Sakic run that team. That
And
2002 team is unbelievable.
Canada trying to hang on and get a break. It's going to be a break. It is Joe Sakic scores. Joe Sakic scores, and that makes it 5-2 Canada. Surely that's got to be it.
Take a look at the Canadian bench. If you doubt me when I say that's more than enough. Here it is. Sakic beats Leclerc to the net. The American defenseman fell in the center zone to give the one step Joe Sakic needed to get in alone and make sure that Canada won the game.
Yeah, a taste of the 2002 roster is you got Belfour, Brodeur, and Joseph in net. You got, like as you said, you had Lemieux, you had Sakic, you had Lindros, and then you had Paul Kariya, Owen Nolan, Joe McGinley, guys like Shanahan, Yzerman, McInnes, Brewer, Blake, Niedermeyer, Pronger, Jovanovski, Adam Foote, with Pat Quinn behind the bench. Hard to get much better than that.
And I feel like I remember the narrative of 2006 being like, who's going to take, like, who was the torch being passed to? Like, Sid was, I think, on the team. No, he wasn't.
He was not. And I think that was sort of a conversation is like 19-year-old Sidney Crosby probably does deserve to be on this team, but I don't even know if he hadn't earned it was sort of the conversation.
Right. And I think, but he was already like the best player in the world.
Yeah, absolutely right.
But I do remember that. It was like a lot of old vets that just like weren't going to do it anymore.
Yeah, it was Shane Doan, Chris Draper,
Yeah.
Todd Bertuzzi, Simone Gagne, Ryan Smith, always on these teams. Ryan Smith, I think, is on Team Canada this year at the Olympics if they played it. And Toronto Maple Leafs legend Joe Thornton also on all of these teams.
Yeah, of course, because he's been playing for almost my entire life.
Anyway, Wayne Gretzky coached that team. If you want to know how disappointingly bad, Wayne Gretzky not a good hockey coach. Don't know why.
And that was also in his scandal days, wasn't it? And there's a narrative of whether that was going to be a distraction because we love our narratives when it comes to Canadian hockey.
And then he moved into the press box, right? He was like the GM of this.
I think so.
He's one of the architects of the 2010 team.
Yeah, him and Yzerman, I want to say.
Something like that. Lots of speculation, as always. Lots of panels and boards and mock rosters and whatnot leading into this. Because, again, not just a chance at Olympic retribution, but we are talking about on home ice. This was in Vancouver. Very important. At the time, I was I would have been in my second or third year of working at Sportsnet. No, that's not true. I would have been in my fourth year, 2010. I started there at 21. So my fourth year of working at Sportsnet, and I got to work on a bunch of Olympic coverage, and it was at the time a big career highlight, sort of being a part of that big engine that whirs out Olympic coverage and Olympic stuff, and it being on home soil was a extremely big deal. Even 10 years later now, it seems hard to properly state that the Olympics being in Canada was a huge deal in 2010.
Yeah, I wonder, I've been thinking about this when we were prepping for this episode, and then now that we're doing it. I'm trying to figure out whether my, detachment from caring about international hockey anymore. If it's like, because like if this was like a once in a lifetime kind of scenario, or was this like, am I just like old and jaded now?
Well, I mean, I think
like I remember
this
being
is the perfect
I remember being
thing.
so excited for the roster reveal, and like you couldn't pay me to watch that today.
Right. Well, on one hand, you were 20 years old. On the other hand, this really is the perfect storm of home ice, perfect age. Olympic hockey was still in a bit of a novelty because we had 2002, and nobody really watched, as we established for the 5th time here. Nobody really watched 2006 because it was time zone didn't quite match up. It was the perfect roster with the perfect amount of star power. Really, playing at home is a huge deal, and it was, as we talked about, some of the guys that got left off the 2006 team, the guys that made the 2010 team. It was a dramatic sort of shift into this next wave guys. You had guys like Drew Doughty and Duncan Keith, Shea Weber, Sidney Crosby, of course, the big one, Bergeron, your Getzlafs, Heatley, Iginla, Brendan Morrow. Somebody has to play on the 4th line. Rick Nash, of course, returning. Mike Richards, Corey Perry, Eric Stahl, Joe Thornton, as always, Maple Leafs legend, Jonathan Taves, Brodeur, Fleury, and Luongo in net. So it was a little more like this was, without a doubt, the best players in the NHL were on this team. There was no question.
Yeah, like, I don't mean this in any disrespect, 'cause obviously he had a wonderful career and made the Olympic team, but like there was no like Chris Draper here.
Right.
Like this team was
your closest thing to Chris Draper was like Brendan Morrow, who was a very good player.
Who was ridiculous back then.
Yeah.
And I also think, like, we'll get into this in a later episode, but I think that's part of what killed it for me after this too. We're just, like, they're just too good now.
Right. Well, it would be interesting to see, it is like the World Cup of hockey, for all the shit that it took. Like, Team North America was super duper fun. And now, like, losing Olympic hockey in the most recent go round and not knowing if it'll be there the next time around, like, there are certain things that we're not going to get that we did get. Like, we're probably never going to get Crosby and McDavid on the same team, right? We could have had that. We legitimately could have had that, and that we're probably not going to get that. So this was an opportunity for us to see things we were never going to see. But it was the beginning of this new generation of Canadian hockey players, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
An incredible note here that seems impossible. TSN broadcast the selection of the tournament live, and the roster was announced in front of 4,000 fans in December 2009. That's impossible.
It's our pleasure to introduce Canada's goaltenders for the men's Olympic hockey team. From Montreal, Quebec, Martin Brodeur.
De Montréal, Québec, Martin Brodeur.
From Sorel, Quebec, Marc-André Fleury.
De Sorel au Québec, Marc-André Fleury.
From Montreal, Quebec, Roberto Luongo.
De Montréal, Québec, Roberto Luongo. Ladies and gentlemen, hockey fans, mesdames et messieurs amateurs de hockey, vos gardiens de but d'équipe Canada, your Team Canada goaltenders.
Right? Like that's what I mean about the hype for Team Canada hockey at the Vancouver Olympics was beyond anything that I think could ever happen again. Mm-hmm. Like, this is early days of things like Twitter, early days of social media. I kind of do feel like this was just like a once in a lifetime scenario that happened to kind of fall the right way.
It was the perfect storm. It was exactly the right roster at exactly the right time, playing in exactly the right city. Super hyped for this tournament. It was unquestionably the crown jewel of the tournament. I think it came right at the end.
I think it was literally the very last event.
I'm pretty sure it was, right? Because it was the same day as the closing ceremonies, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, you're right. Because the closing ceremonies were at night, and this game started, I want to say, at like noonish, 1 p.m.
Yeah, it was definitely an afternoon game. I remember that very well.
And also, like, if I remember correctly, I believe it was also for which country would win the most gold medals
Right, something
at the
like
Olympics.
that.
Like, it was all of the elements together are like nobody, like, I don't know how I feel. I mean, I don't care, but I also don't know like where I land on the, does most golds, quote unquote, win the Olympics, or does most total medals? But regardless of where you land on that discussion, there was an element of Canada, quote unquote, winning the Olympics on home soil in men's hockey.
Yeah.
Like, it's truly, we'll never see something like that again.
Your captain, Scott Niedermayer, Pronger, Crosby, and Iginla. Your alternates. Remember those last two names. They come in handy. The games were played, an interesting note from Jake here. The games were played at Canadian Hockey Place, which is GM Place, which is now Rogers Arena, Rogers Center, Rogers Place.
Something like that.
It's a Rogers building because you can't have sponsor names in the Olympics. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either until just now.
In a rare moment of, getting to be frontrunners in sports in our lives, it was gold or bust for sure.
Yeah.
And we'll see how they do on that track. We will dig into it and start the tournament in the next episode of Sportsfeld Storytime.